Okay, so where are we in the Jewish calendar? We're 2 days before Tu B'Av, the 15th of Av. We are 6.5 weeks away from Rosh Hashanah, which will definitely be the strangest Rosh Hashanah of our lives. Unless Mashiach comes first, and then it's definitely going to be the strangest Rosh Hashanah of our lives. Strange, not in a bad way, but different. And we are doing our best to create some sort of sanity during this time, some sort of clarity. Okay, what now? Where do we go? What's next? But for the next few days, people are going to focus on love. Because it's the 15th of Av, and historically that is the Jewish love. What does that mean? It means in the time of the temple, boys and girls would go out on this day. The girls would be dancing in the vineyards, and the boys would be going to look for a good mate, and lots of shidduchim would happen. The old version of dating, where pretty much you saw one girl and you liked the way she was dancing, so you decided, okay. And the daughters and sons of Jerusalem would meet each other, and that's one of the reasons that ever since then it's became known as a day of love. The funny thing is that in our society, we still call marriage love. In other words, when somebody says they found love, in other words, they found a partner to spend their life with. And yet, every single joke you hear about marriage refers to it as the death of love. When you stand at a chuppah and the boy promises, honey, you're going to be the center of my life for the rest of my life, and she's quelling and there's a tear rolling down her cheek, and everybody's saying, gosh, that's so sweet. The 10th year anniversary, they just look at each other, mazel tov, let's go out. The 20th anniversary, it's their kids already that are making them the anniversary. And it's nice and sentimental. Then it gets to 30 and 40 and 50. And the word love becomes less and less a word that's associated with marriage. We use words like loyal. We use words like bickering, fighting over the fridge, and many other terms that to define a relationship. But love is the kind of word that erodes after time. You don't hear about 70-year-olds in love or 60-year-olds talking about how, like, with their eyes alive, oh my gosh, my spouse is amazing. Nah, doesn't happen. Nope. And then but yet your granddaughter or grandson walk in and say, Grandma, I want to introduce you to this wonderful guy, and you're all back into that sentimental love. It's like we fall into this feely goody stuff over and over and over. And even though we know that it's false, but we still want to believe it, that fairy tale wedding. I've asked myself a simple question. Why are most people who are engaged now not getting married in COVID? I'm not talking about for everyone. Everyone, a lot of individuals have reasons. But if I wanted to be a bit generic for the sake of being generic, ultimately it's because the wedding day won't be incredible. And the wedding day has to be a day of magnificence. It has to be a day that's going to go down in history, full of love and affection and pink and white and reds and flowers and roses and lilies and this and tuxedos, the whole thing. It's like this fantasy we have. And today, these days, you're not getting Johnny Byrne and you're not getting your music much happening. You maybe get a singer at a chuppah, that's all you get. The chuppah is straightforward, there's nothing going on, it's bland. There's no party after that. Who needs a wedding, right? Who needs a wedding in this climate? But if we waited to better times, then, the wedding is going to be fantastic. And in other words, what we have is we have this fantasy that we don't want to let go of. Tonight is my anniversary. It's 11 years since Chaya and I got married. So maybe that's why I'm focusing on love. It's exactly 11 years ago. It was not the 2nd, it was maybe the 1st of August. And I arrived on a Monday and got married on a Tuesday. So today, 11 years ago, is the first time I ever stepped foot in South Africa. And yeah, it's a time of the year that I kind of focus on. Ah, so sweet. So thank God. I agree, of course. I know I did facilitate at one wedding that was beautiful. I'm just being cynical over here. But yeah, I've definitely been at weddings during COVID that are magnificent. But I think for many people, they're struggling to let go of that fantasy. And maybe because my wedding day was average, not because my wife was average, but because I came to a hole where I didn't know a soul. And so much so I walked around offering whiskey to people, and one person asked me, "Who am I?" I hadn't met 98% of the crowd. Besides my siblings and my mom and dad, I didn't know anybody, including the bride. I did know her a bit. So with that in mind, it comes this time of the year and I start getting sentimental and start wondering, really, okay, 11 years later, the wedding day, it's okay. Marriage, awesome, complicated, messy, dynamic, interesting, growth, and a bunch of other stuff, right? And yet, for most of us, we still, even though we've been married, or at least whether we've been married successfully or it didn't work out, we still have that fantasy of love. We have that absolute fantasy, if only, oh gosh, oh, it's so lovely. Isn't it beautiful the way that groom spoke at the evening? Oh gosh, he was so sweet. Sorry, there's a lot of screaming going on in the background. So sweet, so this, so that. We struggle to let go of the fantasy. We really, really struggle. We want to believe that it's true. But is it? Does love exist? Does it only exist in the beautiful and young? Does it only exist in our mind? It's a famous story about a woman who was dating in her 50s or 60s, and she was struggling to find her shidduch. And she comes to the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, the problem is you've read too many novels. And you start thinking that marriage is a feeling that you just like, On the contrary, every day that you're spent together with your spouse over years and years and years, what you're building is true love. In other words, love is loyalty. Love is sharing everything in your life. Love is one bank account. Love is trust. Love is raising your children together. Love is sometimes going on holiday. Love is living life. Love is not outside of life. It's inside of life. Now, I'm talking to pretty much everybody who's has more experience than me in marriage. And yet, I think that's a conversation we could all have, or at least think about, and that is this principle that Tevye was wrong and Golda was right in Fiddler on the Roof. When Tevye says, "Do you love me?" and she says, "I've been folding your laundry for 25 years. If that's not love, what is?" She's right. She's right. But he is enamored by his three daughters who are coming back with love story. First, his first daughter falls in love with a tailor rather than the butcher. The second one falls in love with a idealistic communist. And the third one falls in love with a non-Jew. And they're all saying, "But Daddy, I love him." And he starts wondering, one second, I don't know. We just stood under the chuppah. I was put next to this Golda. We got married. And for 25 years later, we have three daughters and we have no idea what's going on. So you think about that. Even though in our lives we know it doesn't work, we still want it. We have this craving for it. That if only I had a different life, my life would be a fiction. My life would look like this young couple's. When a groom turns to his bride under the chuppah and says, I love you, what does he mean? And I'm talking about a nice guy. I'm not talking about a narcissist. A decent fellow, well-raised boyki. What does he mean? 9 out of 10 times he means you make me feel good. In other words, I like the feeling I have when I'm with you. So love is how you make me feel about myself. And that's not negative. It's fine. I'm saying at some stage at the beginning of a relationship, you're asking yourself the question, how does he or she make me feel about myself? But at some stage that has to outgrow it, because ultimately you didn't sign up to a feel-good secretary. You signed up to a relationship that's life itself. In other words, you're going to be sharing with this individual every single element of your life, your finances and your time and your children and your this and pretty much every single precious thing in your life, maybe other than your personal talents, but your life will be shared with this individual. So if I only like the way you make me feel, what happens when you stop making me feel that way? I feel let down. I feel betrayed. I feel like I didn't sign up for this. There's no question that your children's generation is struggling with marriage much more than yours. My generation is struggling with marriage. Not because we're worse people. And I don't even know if it's because we're we're sissies and we're weaklings. I think we have a wrong perception of what life is. Life is pleasures. You get a new laptop because you want more pleasure out of your computer. You get a new car because you want more pleasure out of your car. I was talking to Chaya's grandmother yesterday, and she was telling us she remembers growing up in Israel in the 40s and 50s when there was absolute poverty and rationing of food. And she remembers a story where one time her great uncle comes in and asks her father or grandfather, whatever, can you make me a cake? And he has 3 eggs. And he's like, cherish these eggs, 3 eggs. It was like a big commodity. And eventually they make him a cake, and it's a bit of a flat cake. And he walks in and says, I gave you 3 eggs, and that's all I get out of this, like this little flat cake. Now, when you hear that story, you obviously think, oh gosh, but think about it. Once upon a time, not too long ago, 3 eggs was a big deal. Maybe even in some of your childhoods, half a dozen eggs didn't always afford it. You couldn't always have what you wanted. So you never believed that life was supposed to be pleasant. You thought that if life is pleasant, that's nice. But that's not what you signed up for. You signed up to life. In other words, when a person goes through hardships in life and has a bit of a lack at some stage in their life, they develop a healthier perspective on life and the fact that life isn't about dreams, roses, and lilies. It's about living. And I do think COVID will do that to this generation. I think COVID is to this generation what, let's say, poverty or revolutions were to the previous generation. This is the awakening where suddenly people my age and younger are suddenly waking up 1 second. Really? What do you mean? I'm a successful accountant. I've built myself a career. I married a beautiful person. Our first house was already in Santon. I mean, come on, like we didn't even have to move into Norwood. We're like real quality. And life is supposed to be, sophisticated and dignified. And I hang around with the cool people and I go to whiskey tastings and I go to bars and I go and, on jets and I meet people all around the world. I'm cool. Being a cool person during COVID doesn't stand for much anything other than maybe posting pictures of your trips 3 years ago on Facebook. But cool doesn't really, it's not much of a value. It doesn't have a currency in COVID. Like you're cool and therefore what? You're the one that gets invited to all weddings? Not. You're the one that gets invited to all social? Not. You're the one that dresses up? You never dress up. Who dresses up these days? So the whole cool commodity, the whole cool currency is gone. And I think that in some way, this is an awakening where we're suddenly just they're taking away from us. The world is taking away from us a fiction that life is about pleasure. The average kid that grows up today thinks that life's about pleasure. If you work hard enough, you'll get enough money and you'll be able to live a life of pleasure. Most kids aren't working enough just to support their family. They want to live a great life. And what's a great life? You have a lot more pleasures. You have a lot more money in the account, so you're never worried. You have a nice car, it's a pleasurable experience. You go on nice holidays, you fly first class, you get pampered, etc., etc., etc. People develop this fiction of pleasure. We're like a pleasure addicted generation. So, people will say we're instant gratification. I don't know if it's instant gratification. It's that as well. I think it's first and foremost this fantasy that I'm here to be pleasured. And if I don't have pleasure, then my life is not quality. And therefore, everything has to be perfect. The wedding has to be perfect. The photographer has to be perfect. Life has to be perfect. And I hope and I pray that for people like myself in my time, that we're able to walk out of these times with a little more perspective. 1 second, one second. Life's about doing. Life's about loving. Life's about sharing. Life's about caring. Life is about living life. And the pleasures are those nice, sweet moments that God gives us as a gift. Once in a while, we have a pleasurable moment. We just have this nachas, so we're sitting on a comfortable space, or we're just in a beautiful relationship, and we love that, and that's great. But that's not my be-all and end-all. That's just a nice assistant on the side. It makes life a little easier and more pleasurable, but I'm not chasing that. I'm not chasing pleasure. And this, by the way, explains why it's a generation that worships youth, right? Older people often feel neglected in these times. Instead of being the wise old people in their family, they feel neglected by society. Why? Because ultimately, they're not good looking at the same level when they were 25. They're not fun. They're not cool. Some of them are, but on the most part. And if life's all about pleasure, then the biggest era of pleasure in your life, at least when you're the most obsessed and life's all about fun and games, is in your 20s and 30s. And that's when, life is put on a pedestal. And after that, you feel like you're middle age or next stage, and you're finding the new pleasures of life. But ultimately, my youth, that was the great times. Free of responsibility, fly, love, just cruise. But if the value of life wasn't pleasure, the value of life was wisdom. The value of life was decency. The value of life was humility. Then the older somebody gets, they usually get better at that. It's a funny thing. In your youth, you don't have much character, but you have a lot of good looks and maybe, pizzazz. But as you get older, the looks start fading, but your character starts building. And why is that? Because at some stage, maybe to get two young people to marry who don't have character, if there was no looks, then it definitely wouldn't work. But at some stage, it's no longer about the looks. And at some stage, it's about the character of the person. And that is what holds a relationship. Unless you're like Donald Trump, who's in his 70s marrying a 40-year-old, because you never realized that at some stage, it's not about the looks, it's about maturity. But not everyone figures it out. And I think it's important that our kids hear this from us, and whatever way we bring it across in the most, appropriate, that yes, I'm so happy for you, and she's fantastic for you, and you're both so happy. But ultimately, what's going to make or break this marriage is not how fantastic and amazing and charismatic. It's the grind of life. Are you committed to marriage? Are you committed to life? Are you committed to show up no matter how complicated life is? Are you committed to forgive even though there's sometimes you don't want to? Are you committed to just stick it through hell and high water? Because if she's here for pleasure, second she gives me attitude, our marriage quality starts going down, right? It's not as much fun as it used to be. I know couples dating, and sometimes you hear about them breaking up. We're no longer in love. Oh, really? What did you think love was, and what did it feel like when you fell out of it? At some stage, the person no longer was fun for us. As the sages say, constant pleasure is not pleasure, right? So at some stage you get over it, and you're looking for the next fix. Relationships are not a drug. It's not about how they make you feel about yourself. It's about how they build you as a person. And yes, sometimes in a healthy relationship, many times you'll feel good about yourself, but that's not what you go in for, or that's not what you stick it through for. And I'll be honest, this roses and lilies marriage, when I was a kid and I was not really that exposed to movies and novels. I remember when I originally got exposed and like I started reading the fictions, I was obsessed with it. Wow. In our Haredi world, we don't have any of that, man. This is so romantic. Oh my gosh. Yeah, lasted for a while. I bought into the fiction. But then I started having people open up to me in my capacity as a rabbi. And I suddenly realized that people are struggling in these glamorous relationships because ultimately, other than attraction at the beginning, they're not actually sure what brought them together. Why did you marry the other person? I don't know. He was fantastic. He made me feel like a queen. Okay, now what? Now he's an old grumpy man, and how's he making you feel now? I think that it's not my personal thought. Torah says, love is not a feeling that makes me feel good about myself. Love is a feeling that says, I want to be there for you. How do you know if you love somebody? If you want to give to them, not if you want to receive from them. You want to give to them. How do you know you love your child? If you give to your child, whatever it is. You've never heard a parent sit there saying, I love my child, and they mean it in obviously not romantic, but in this like, starry-eyed way. No, I love my child, and I'm committed to help this kid actualize his or her potential. And yet in marriage, somehow love takes on a whole different connotation. It's roses on the floor, it's glitter, it's flower girls, it's white, it's black, it's just, sweet speeches. 1 second, if love is the same word that you used for your child and for your spouse, then why does it get such a different connotation? It's the same word. You love your mother, right? If I asked you, do you love your parents? Unless there's a real dysfunction, you would say yes. And obviously you're not meaning it the same way. So why? Why can't love in a marriage mean the same thing it means everywhere else? Obviously marriage also has the romance and also has a whole different element that other relationships don't have. But at its core, the love should mean the same thing in all relationships. And that is, I care for you. You mean a lot to me. I want to be there for you. It might not sound romantic, but love has nothing to do with romance. Romance is a nice extra at the beginning of marriage, or sometimes it even lasts longer. It's a nice extra, just makes life more pleasurable, but that's not love. We mix two words. Love has nothing to do with romance. Love is, I'm committed to you. We're in this. I'm committed to my child. I'm committed to my parent. I'm committed to my siblings in whatever way I can. I'm committed to my spouse. The other elements of marriage are special. I'm not saying they aren't. The fact that you chose this person, you didn't choose your siblings, you didn't choose your parent, you didn't choose your child. but you chose your spouse. There's no question. There's an attraction. There's a passion. There's an up and down. There's a, intimacy. There's a lot going on over there. But fundamentally, it's another person in your life that you're committing to care for. Now, it's not another, because it's going to become the priority in a way more than, parents, siblings, etc. But it's still the same word. It's commitment. I'm in it. I asked a woman, she was like, fetching about her husband. And I said, whatever, leave him. She says, when I got married, I made a deal. I will only walk out of this as a widow, not a divorcee. So murder, yes. Divorce, never. And again, I'm not saying everyone has to take that attitude. And obviously, an abusive relationship is nothing to talk about. I'm not talking about abuse. But other than that, yeah, you're stuck. Not stuck in a bad way. That's life. That's the marriage I signed up for. That's whatever comes my way till death does us apart. In other words, two people standing over there, they're in their 20s or young 30s. They have no idea what their 40s are going to look like. They have no idea what their 50s are going to look like. They have no idea what their 60s are going to look like. They don't even know if they'll make it till 60. But till death does us apart. That's what it means. I'm committed. I can't promise you that I'll feel romantic towards you for 30 years. That's why when a guy gets up over there and says, honey, I'll love you forever. Who are you kidding? The way you're translating love, not a chance. Really? You're going to think of her in 30 years the way you think now? Yeah, there are some couples. I'm not saying that, maybe 1% of couples that are still giddy over each other in their 80s. On the most part, you're not exactly giving the same romantic speech in your 60s as you're giving in your 20s. And even if you are that kind of couple, you're not going to feel this all day, every day. I mean, you are human beings, and you will disappoint each other, and you'll get on each other's nerves. Honey, I will love you forever. Sure, because you've lived forever and you know so much about forever. So please tell us how it works. If I would have to give my wedding speech, I never did. After a few years of marriage, it would sound something very different. Honey, I'll make it work with you forever. I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up in the same room as you forever. I'll support you forever. I'll try to be kind for you forever. But what I'll feel for you, I have no idea what I'll feel for you. How do I know? I'm not in control of my feelings all the time. Sometimes I feel sad. Sometimes I feel disappointed. Sometimes I feel angry. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as I control myself, I don't act it out. I'll always be kind. I won't always feel kind. I'll always act nice. I won't always feel nice. Because love has very little to do with feelings. It's what you do. It's a famous expression that the Hebrew word for love is ve'ahavta, ahava. And the word ahava is split up of the word have, which means to give, 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 more give, more give, give. Because again, love is much more manifest in my hand and what I do with it than in my heart and what I feel. So when you're saying, I'm in love with you, what you should be saying is, I find you worthy enough and amazing enough that I want to spend the rest of my life giving to you. That's love. So like I remember when I was dating, a guy of mine was saying, don't ask yourself if you love Chaya. Ask yourself, do you want to spend your life with her? And can you see yourself giving to her for your rest of your life? And receiving from her. Because receiving sometimes is as important as giving, allowing them to give to you. But will you allow it to be a relationship of giving and receiving, or you just feel good in their presence? You know, you feel good in the presence of a lot of people. Celebrities, people you admire, friends. I don't think you go into marriage feeling good. There's a lot of other places in life that we could feel good. Fundamentally, it's you are good enough in my eyes and you're worthy enough in my eyes that I want to spend the rest of the life sharing with you. Even if I want to kill you sometimes, I will still share with you. Even if every ounce of my body is screaming, get out, I will still make the cup of coffee and show up. It's not romantic, I'll be honest. I don't think any movie would sell with this version of love. And fiction would go out of business because we still want to believe those beautiful stories. Oh gosh, oh my God, he chased her for 10 years. That's so sweet. It's funny, most books about love only talk about the beginning of it. And the story ends after they're standing under the chuppah or the priest and they're married. In other words, where's the end of the story? At the beginning of love. But that's ridiculous. That's the beginning of story. But that's not the end. Yay, I'm married. Now what? Now is when life starts. Now is when your humility is going to start having to kick in. Otherwise, you're not going to walk out of this, with 2 arms and 2 legs. Why is the story always ending? They're standing under the snow. He kisses her, and the movie comes to an end. What happened next, huh? What happened when the parents met each other? What happened when they had a kid in their life? What happened to the relationship then? Romantic movies always end with the beginning of love because it's true. Romance ends when love starts. Romance is just a gift that God gave us that when we're younger, stupid, we should have this good feeling that makes us feel good about ourselves, so we should commit. But then one day when you wake up, after your hangover, you wake up and you suddenly realize, oh gosh, it's much more than that. And now I'm stuck. I was making a poster yesterday for a lecture that I'm giving tomorrow night on love. It'll take a bit of a different direction in this. And you type love and all you see is roses and hearts and weddings. Go Google it. When's the first, how long will it take you to find a picture of 2 elderly people holding hands together? Not the first pictures. Nah, it's young, beautiful people staring under beautiful canopies, absolutely adoring each other. It's not love. Nothing to do with it. It's another feel-good experience. It's another self-serving, pleasurable experience. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you acknowledge it for what it is. I would tell couples, regardless of how your marriage day plays out, that will have very little impact on your actual marriage. So instead of spending so much effort on your marriage day, spend a lot of effort on your marriage. Now, it might not be as glamorous because you're not choosing tablecloths and balloons and music and cameras. You're choosing how to break your character and to become more humble and bite your tongue and control your anger. Those are not glamorous things, but gosh, that's going to make your life so much more rewarding. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just having a fiction in my mind. Maybe it really is all about the wedding and the feelings and the romance and the photographer and posting it all on Facebook and everyone just telling you how good looking and beautiful you are. Maybe that's what it is. I'll never know. I missed out. But I think this is it. I do think that marriage is much more than Facebook posts about and declaring your love. I'll be honest, I was having this dilemma earlier today because tonight's my anniversary. And now that I'm back on Facebook, like it seems like protocol. I have to go wish Chaya how much I love her. But the problem is she's not on Facebook. So am I wishing it to her or am I wishing it to everybody to know how much I love my wife? I don't know. I'm waiting to find out what the Facebook etiquette is. Until then, shekayach everybody. Thank you so much for joining. What a great crowd. And please God, only good stuff. L'chaim.